Perfect, I said to my daughter-in-law Marl when she announced that 25 people from her family would be coming to spend Christmas at my house. I'm going on vacation. You cook and clean. I'm not your maid. Her face turned pale, as if she had seen a ghost. But what she didn't know was that the real surprise was just beginning. My name is Susanna, I'm 66 years old, and for the last 5 years, I've been treated like the servant of my own house. It all started when my son Renato married that woman. From day one, Marlon decided I was her personal maid. Susanna, bring me coffee. Susanna, clean this. Susanna, cook for my guests. And I, like a fool, always obeyed. I thought I was keeping my family together, but I had reached my limit. That December Tuesday, Marlon entered my kitchen as she always did, without knocking, with that fake smile I hated so much, wearing a very expensive red dress that she had probably paid for with my son's money. Her heels clacked against my ceramic floor like hammer blows to my patience. Susanna, she said in that condescending tone she always used with me. I have wonderful news. My entire family is coming to spend Christmas here. It's just 25 people. Just 25 people. As if that wasn't a big deal, as if I were some machine to cook and clean. I saw the malice in her eyes as she continued with her master plan. She settled into my kitchen chair, crossed her legs, and began listing names as if reading a shopping list. I already spoke to my sister Griselda, my cousin Evely, my brother-in-law Enrique, my uncle Elias. Everyone is coming. My nephews, my second cousins, Griselda's kids. It'll be a perfect Christmas. She paused dramatically, waiting for my usual panic reaction. Of course, you'll take care of everything. The food, the cleaning, serving the tables. Her words hit me like slaps to the face. I remembered all the times I had prepared dinners for her friends while she took the credit. All the times I had cleaned up after her parties while she slept until noon. All the times I had been invisible in my own home. We'll need at least 3 turkeys, she continued, ignoring my silence. And that chocolate dessert you make. Oh, and you'll need to decorate the whole house. I want it to look perfect for the Instagram photos. She waited for my usual response, yes, Marlon, but this time it was different. This time, something inside me had broken forever. I looked her directly in the eyes with a calmness that even surprised me. Perfect, I repeated, watching her smile start to fade. It will be a perfect Christmas for you, because I won't be here. The silence that followed was deafening. Marlon blinked several times, as if she hadn't heard me correctly. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. The clacking of her heels stopped abruptly. What do you mean you won't be here? She finally managed to articulate, her voice trembling slightly. She straightened in the chair, her perfect posture starting to crumble. Exactly what you heard. I'm going on vacation. You can cook, clean, and serve yourselves. I'm not your maid. I watched the color drain completely from her face. Her hands began to shake slightly. The coffee cup she had been holding clinked against the saucer. For the first time in 5 years, Marlon didn't know what to say. But, Susanna, she stammered, I already told everyone to come. It's all planned. You can't do this, she blurted out. Of course I can. This is my house. Those 4 words fell like a bomb in the kitchen. Marlon stood wide-eyed, her face shifting from disbelief to fury. She stood up abruptly, her heels clacking again, but this time with desperation. This is ridiculous. Renato won't allow this. Renato can think whatever he wants, but the decision has been made. For the first time, I had control, but what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that my decision hadn't been spontaneous. I had been planning this for months, and I had my reasons that would soon leave them all speechless. Marlon's expression shifted from shock to fury in seconds. Her cheeks turned red, and her eyes narrowed like a snake about to strike. She approached me, invading my personal space as she always did when she wanted to intimidate me. You know what, Susanna? I've always known you were selfish, but this is the last straw. Her voice became venomous, each word loaded with contempt. My family is coming from far away, some from other countries. And you? You're going to ruin their Christmas over a whim. A whim. 5 years of mistreatment, humiliation, and emotional abuse. And she called it a whim. I felt the rage rise in my chest, but I remained calm. I had learned to control my emotions after so long being her victim. "This isn't my problem," I replied, with a calmness that threw her off even more. "You should have consulted before inviting 25 people to my house." "Our house," she shouted, completely losing her composure. "Renato is your son. This house will be ours one day." There it was. The truth that had always hung in the air but had never been spoken aloud. Marlon didn't see me as family. She saw me as a temporary obstacle before inheriting everything I had built through years of hard work and sacrifice. "Interesting perspective," I murmured, watching as her pupils dilated with panic upon realizing what she had revealed. "Very interesting." At that moment, I heard the keys at the front door. Renato had arrived from work. Marlon ran to him like a child going to complain to Dad, her heels clicking frantically. Renato, your mom has gone crazy. She says she won't help with Christmas. She says she's going on vacation and leaving us alone with all my family." I heard their voices muffled from the living room. Marlon spoke rapidly, her tone high-pitched and dramatic. Renato murmured responses I couldn't distinguish. After a few minutes, their steps neared the kitchen. My son appeared in the doorway, his suit wrinkled from a day at the office, his face tired but annoyed. Behind him, Marlon followed like a shadow, arms crossed, with a triumphant expression. She clearly expected him to put me in my place. "Mom," Renato began, with that paternalistic tone he had adopted since his marriage. "Marlon told me about your decision. Don't you think you're being a bit dramatic?" Dramatic. My own son was calling me dramatic for refusing to be his wife's servant. I felt something cold and hard settle in my stomach. Something that had been growing for months finally crystallized at that moment. "No, Renato, I'm not being dramatic, I'm being clear." "But Mom, it's Christmas, it's family time. Marlon already invited everyone. We can't cancel now." "I didn't say to cancel. I said I won't be here." Marlon stepped forward, placing herself between Renato and me like a human barrier. "See what I mean?" she said. "She's completely irrational." "What will my family think? What am I going to tell them?" "Tell them the truth," I replied calmly. "That you assumed I'd be their maid without consulting me, and that you were wrong." Renato sighed deeply, running his hand through his hair as he did when frustrated. "Mom, be reasonable. Do you know that Marlon can't cook for 25 people alone?" I asked. "Why not? I've cooked for her parties for years." "It's time she learned." "But I work," Marlon protested. "I can't take days off to cook. My career is important." Her career, a part-time position at a boutique that she had probably gotten thanks to Renato's connections. But of course, her career was more important than my time, my energy, my dignity. "Then hire Catherine," I suggested with a sweet smile. "There are plenty of excellent options in the city." "Catering costs a fortune," Renato exclaimed. "Why spend thousands of dollars when you can do it?" He stopped abruptly, realizing what he was about to say. "When you can do it for free, like always, like the maid you think I am." The silence between us stretched like a crack growing deeper. Marlon and Renato exchanged nervous glances. I could see the wheels turning in their heads, trying to find a way to manipulate me into giving in. "Look, Mom," Renato finally said, adopting a softer tone. "I know you've been sensitive lately. Maybe you're going through some hormonal changes." "Hormonal changes? Seriously?" He was reducing me to a hysterical woman going through menopause. The fury I had been holding back began to simmer beneath the surface, but I managed to keep my voice steady. "There's nothing hormonal about this, Renato. There's something very clear: respect. And for 5 years, neither you nor your wife have shown me any." "That's not true," Marlon protested. "We've always treated you well. You're part of the family. Part of the family that serves, cleans, and cooks while you all have fun. Part of the family that is never consulted, but always expected to obey." Renato moved closer to me, putting his hand on my shoulder as he used to do when he was a child and wanted something. But he was no longer the sweet boy I had raised. He was a man who had chosen his wife over his mother in every conflict over the past 5 years. "It's okay, Mom," he said, his voice softening. "I understand you're upset, but think about it. It's just 1 week. After Christmas, everything goes back to normal." Normality, I repeated, with a bitter laugh. His normality, where I was invisible, except when they needed me, where my feelings didn't matter as long as their lives were comfortable, where my home had stopped being my sanctuary and had become their personal hotel. No, Renato, things aren't going back to normal because I'm leaving tomorrow. They both froze. Marlon was the first to react. Tomorrow, she asked, her voice rising in pitch. Tomorrow, I confirmed, enjoying the panic beginning to shine in their eyes. I've already arranged everything. What they didn't know was that I truly had everything arranged, but not in the way they thought. This is crazy. Marlon screamed, her eyes wide as she paced around my kitchen like a caged animal. You can't leave tomorrow. It's impossible. My family arrives in 3 days. Well, you should have thought about that before assuming I'd be your maid, I replied, keeping my voice calm as I casually washed my coffee cup. Every movement calculated to show that their dramatic acting didn't faze me. Renato stood there, nervously shifting from one foot to the other, clearly torn between supporting his hysterical wife and trying to reason with me. His eyes bounced back and forth between us, as if he were watching a very tense tennis match. Mom, please, he finally murmured. At least tell us where you're going. When are you coming back? I'm going to visit my sister in Miami, I lied smoothly. I'll be back after New Year's. The lie came so naturally that even I was surprised, but it was necessary. They couldn't know my real plans, not yet. After New Year's. Marlon practically choked on her own words. But, what are we going to do? I already told everyone to come. My uncle Elias already bought the plane tickets from Colombia. Griselda canceled her plans. Evely asked for days off from her job. Those are their problems, not mine, I said, watching as desperation began to replace the anger in Marlon's face. Her perfectly manicured hands trembled as she clung to the marble countertop, her knuckles white from the pressure. Susanna, her voice changed suddenly, becoming sweet and manipulative. You know I've always considered you like a second mother. You're so important to us. You can't just leave us like this. There it was, the change of tactics from fury to emotional manipulation. I had seen this move many times before, but it no longer worked on me. If you truly considered me like a mother, you wouldn't treat me like a maid, I replied, my voice firm. But I don't treat you like a maid. I just thought you enjoyed cooking for the family. I thought you liked feeling useful. Useful. That word hit me like a dagger. For 5 years, I had believed that being useful was my way of keeping the peace, of ensuring I had a place in my son's life. But now I understood that being useful had only turned me into a shadow in my own home. You know what, Marlon? You're right. I do like feeling useful. That's why I'm going to be useful to myself for the first time in years. Renato spoke again, his frustration now clear in every line of his face. Mom, this isn't fair. You know we don't have the money to hire Catherine for 25 people. The deposit for the new apartment drained our savings. A new apartment? This was the first I had heard of it. My eyes narrowed as I processed this information. Since when were you planning to move? And why hadn't you told me anything? What new apartment? I asked, my voice laced with dangerous curiosity. Marlon and Renato exchanged a guilty glance. The kind of look you share when you've just revealed something that was meant to stay a secret. Well, Renato began, looking down at his shoes. We were going to tell you after the holidays. We found an amazing place downtown, 3 bedrooms, ocean view, gym in the building. Sounds expensive, I observed, keeping my tone neutral, although my mind was racing. Well, yes, but it's worth the investment. And don't worry, we're not going far. Just 30 minutes away. 30 minutes? I repeated, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Far enough to keep using my house as your personal restaurant, but close enough for privacy. How convenient. And how do you plan to pay for it? I asked, although I already suspected the answer. Marlon suddenly lit up as if she had found the perfect solution to all of our problems. That's why it's so important we have a perfect Christmas, she said. My uncle Elias is very generous when he's impressed, and my brother-in-law Enrique has connections in real estate. If everything goes well, they could help us with Renato's business. There it was. The real reason behind the grand Christmas celebration wasn't about family or tradition. It was about money, about impressing the rich relatives to get financial favors. And I was the key piece in their manipulation plan. I understand, I murmured, letting the silence stretch as they both waited for my response. So, you need your Christmas to be perfect to impress the rich family? I asked, my tone calm. Exactly. Marlon exclaimed, relieved that I finally understood the importance of the situation. I knew you'd get it. You're so smart, Susanna. You always know what's right, Marlon said, her voice filled with that fake sweetness that had always annoyed me. The right thing. For 5 years, the right thing had been sacrificing my comfort, my time, my dignity to make their lives easier. But now I had a completely different perspective on what was right. You're right, Marlon. I know exactly what's right. That's why my decision stands. I'm leaving tomorrow. The hope drained from their faces like spilled water. Marlon began to breathe rapidly, on the edge of a panic attack. You can't do this. You can't ruin our future over a tantrum. This isn't a tantrum. It's a well-thought-out decision. But what will my family think when they arrive and there's no one to welcome them? What will they think when they see there's no food prepared? They'll think your niece invited them without being able to host, and they'll be right. Renato stepped closer, his desperation now palpable. Mom, please, if you really need a vacation, we can postpone it. After New Year's, you can go wherever you want for as long as you want. We'll pay for the trip, the hotel, everything. They were offering to pay for my trip. With what money? I wondered, as they had just said the deposit for the new apartment had left them without savings. But it didn't matter. Their offer came 5 years too late. The offer is tempting, Renato, but I've already made my decision. This is emotional blackmail. Marlon exploded, her sweet mask finally falling apart. You're using our situation to manipulate us. Emotional blackmail? The words hung in the air like an involuntary confession. Because if I was emotionally blackmailing them by refusing to be their free maid, what had they been doing to me for 5 years? Do you know what emotional blackmail is, Marlon? It's making me feel guilty every time I don't want to cook for your friends. It's telling me that a good mother-in-law always puts family first when I refuse to clean up after your parties. It's assuming my plans don't matter because I'm retired and have nothing better to do. Each word was a bullet hitting the target. I saw how both of them flinched slightly with every accusation because they knew it was true. It was all true. That's not the same, Marlon mumbled. But her voice had lost all its previous strength. You're right. It's not the same. Because what you've done is much worse. You've taken my generosity for granted for years. The kitchen sank into tense silence. I could hear the ticking of the wall clock, the hum of the refrigerator, Marlon's shallow breaths. But what I could hear most clearly was the sound of my own freedom approaching, because tomorrow everything would change, and they had no idea how much. That night, while Marlon and Renato continued whispering desperately in the living room, I locked myself in my room and pulled out my laptop. It was time to set the second phase of my plan into motion, a plan that had been brewing for months since I discovered something that changed my entire perspective on my dear daughter-in-law. 3 months ago, while I was cleaning Renato's study like a fool, I found a forgotten folder among his papers. A folder full of bank statements, printed emails, and legal documents. At first, I thought they were work papers, but something caught my attention. Marl's name appeared again and again in transactions I didn't understand. That night, after they had gone to sleep, I went back to the study and meticulously went through everything. What I found froze me to the bone. Marlon had been spending money they didn't have. A lot of money, credit cards in Renato's name that he didn't know about, personal loans using the house as collateral, compulsive shopping at luxury stores totaling over $50,000 in debt. But that wasn't all. I also found emails where Marl discussed with her friends how to handle Renato so he wouldn't find out about her spending, how to keep him distracted while she continued shopping. And the most chilling of all, a thread of messages where she was planning to convince him to sell the house to invest in their future together. My house, the house I had lived in for 30 years, the house I had paid for with my work, my savings, my sacrifices. Marlon wanted Renato to sell it to pay off her compulsive shopping debts. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stayed awake until dawn, processing the betrayal, the manipulation, the deceit. But along with the devastation, something else began to grow, a cold, calculated determination to protect myself. The next day, I started my own quiet investigation. I hired a private detective, a discreet man my lawyer had recommended years ago. I asked him to track all of Marlon's financial activities. What we discovered was even worse than I had imagined. Not only had she been spending compulsively, but she had also been lying about her work. Her important career at the boutique was part-time, and she barely made minimum wage, but she had been telling Renato that she earned 3 times what she actually made. Where did she get the extra money for her personal expenses? The secret credit cards, of course. And there was more. Marl had been telling her family that we were much wealthier than we actually were. She had told them that Renato had a thriving business, that I had a considerable fortune, that our house was worth double its actual value. All lies to maintain her image of a successful woman with a perfect marriage. Now, as I stared at my laptop screen in the quiet darkness of my room, I smiled for the first time in months, because I had taken steps they couldn't even imagine. Do you know that Marlon can't cook for 25 people alone? I asked. Why not? I've cooked for her parties for years. It's time she learned. But I work, Marlon protested. I can't take days off to cook. My career is important. Her career, a part-time position at a boutique that she had probably gotten thanks to Renato's connections. But of course, her career was more important than my time, my energy, my dignity. Then hire Catherine, I suggested with a sweet smile. There are plenty of excellent options in the city. Catering costs a fortune. Renato exclaimed. Why spend thousands of dollars when you can do it? He stopped abruptly, realizing what he was about to say, when you can do it for free, like always, like the maid you think I am. The silence between us stretched like a crack growing deeper. Marlon and Renato exchanged nervous glances. I could see the wheels turning in their heads, trying to find a way to manipulate me into giving in. Look, Mom, Renato finally said, adopting a softer tone. I know you've been sensitive lately. Maybe you're going through some hormonal changes. Hormonal changes? Seriously? He was reducing me to a hysterical woman going through menopause. The fury I had been holding back began to simmer beneath the surface, but I managed to keep my voice steady. There's nothing hormonal about this, Renato. There's something very clear, respect. And for 5 years, neither you nor your wife have shown me any. That's not true, Marlon protested. We've always treated you well. You're part of the family. Part of the family that serves, cleans, and cooks while you all have fun. Part of the family that is never consulted, but always expected to obey. Renato moved closer to me, putting his hand on my shoulder as he used to do when he was a child and wanted something. But he was no longer the sweet boy I had raised. He was a man who had chosen his wife over his mother in every conflict over the past 5 years. It's okay, Mom, he said, his voice softening. I understand you're upset, but think about it. It's just 1 week. After Christmas, everything goes back to normal. Normality, I repeated, with a bitter laugh. His normality, where I was invisible, except when they needed me, where my feelings didn't matter as long as their lives were comfortable, where my home had stopped being my sanctuary and had become their personal hotel. No, Renato, things aren't going back to normal because I'm leaving tomorrow. They both froze. Marlon was the first to react. Tomorrow, she asked, her voice rising in pitch. Tomorrow, I confirmed, enjoying the panic beginning to shine in their eyes. I've already arranged everything. What they didn't know was that I truly had everything arranged, but not in the way they thought. This is crazy. Marlon screamed, her eyes wide as she paced around my kitchen like a caged animal. You can't leave tomorrow. It's impossible. My family arrives in 3 days. Well, you should have thought about that before assuming I'd be your maid, I replied, keeping my voice calm as I casually washed my coffee cup. Every movement calculated to show that their dramatic acting didn't faze me. Renato stood there, nervously shifting from one foot to the other, clearly torn between supporting his hysterical wife and trying to reason with me. His eyes bounced back and forth between us, as if he were watching a very tense tennis match. Mom, please, he finally murmured. At least tell us where you're going. When are you coming back? I'm going to visit my sister in Miami, I lied smoothly. I'll be back after New Year's. The lie came so naturally that even I was surprised, but it was necessary. They couldn't know my real plans, not yet. After New Year's, Marlon practically choked on her own words. But, what are we going to do? I already told everyone to come. My uncle Elias already bought the plane tickets from Colombia. Griselda canceled her plans. Evely asked for days off from her job. Those are their problems, not mine, I said, watching as desperation began to replace the anger in Marlon's face. Her perfectly manicured hands trembled as she clung to the marble countertop, her knuckles white from the pressure. Susanna, her voice changed suddenly, becoming sweet and manipulative. You know, I've always considered you like a second mother. You're so important to us. You can't just leave us like this. There it was, the change of tactics from fury to emotional manipulation. I had seen this move many times before, but it no longer worked on me. If you truly considered me like a mother, you wouldn't treat me like a maid, I replied, my voice firm. But I don't treat you like a maid. I just thought you enjoyed cooking for the family. I thought you liked feeling useful. Useful. That word hit me like a dagger. For 5 years, I had believed that being useful was my way of keeping the peace, of ensuring I had a place in my son's life. But now I understood that being useful had only turned me into a shadow in my own home. You know what, Marlon? You're right. You're absolutely right. I do like feeling useful. That's why I'm going to be useful to myself for the first time in years. Renato spoke again, his frustration now clear in every line of his face. Mom, this isn't fair. You know we don't have the money to hire Catherine for 25 people. The deposit for the new apartment drained our savings. A new apartment? This was the first I had heard of it. My eyes narrowed as I processed this information. Since when were you planning to move? And why hadn't you told me anything? What new apartment? I asked, my voice laced with dangerous curiosity. Marlon and Renato exchanged a guilty glance. The kind of look you share when you've just revealed something that was meant to stay a secret. Well, Renato began, looking down at his shoes, we were going to tell you after the holidays. We found an amazing place downtown, 3 bedrooms, ocean view, gym in the building. Sounds expensive, I observed, keeping my tone neutral, although my mind was racing. Well, yes, but it's worth the investment. And don't worry, we're not going far. Just 30 minutes away. 30 minutes? I repeated, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Far enough to keep using my house as your personal restaurant, but close enough for privacy. How convenient. And how do you plan to pay for it? I asked, although I already suspected the answer. Marlon suddenly lit up as if she had found the perfect solution to all of our problems. That's why it's so important we have a perfect Christmas, she said. My uncle Elias is very generous when he's impressed, and my brother-in-law Enrique has connections in real estate. If everything goes well, they could help us with Renato's business. There it was. The real reason behind the grand Christmas celebration wasn't about family or tradition. It was about money, about impressing the rich relatives to get financial favors. And I was the key piece in their manipulation plan. I understand, I murmured, letting the silence stretch as they both waited for my response. So, you need your Christmas to be perfect to impress the rich family? I asked, my tone calm. Exactly. Marlon exclaimed, relieved that I finally understood the importance of the situation. I knew you'd get it. You're so smart, Susanna. Of course I can talk. How's your morning going? I replied with a calmness that was almost surreal. Mom, please don't do this. Marlon's family just arrived, and we have nothing to offer them, literally nothing. Marlon is crying in the bathroom, and I don't know what to do. I could hear the panic in Renato's voice, but it didn't reach me the way it used to. For the first time in years, I didn't feel responsible for fixing their mess. The silence on the other end of the line stretched out as I let him stew in his desperation. Renato, I began softly, savoring every word. Do you know what it feels like to be in my position for the last 5 years? To wake up every day and feel like nothing more than a servant in my own home? To be constantly invisible, expected to clean up after everyone, cook for them, and still be blamed when things go wrong. His voice faltered, and I could tell he was trying to collect his thoughts. Mom, I didn't know. I didn't understand how much you've been sacrificing. But you can't just leave us hanging like this. You're right, I said. I can't just leave you hanging, and that's exactly why I'm not coming back. This isn't just about me getting a vacation or a break from you two. This is about me taking control of my life for the first time in years. There was a pause, and then Renato's voice grew smaller, almost defeated. I understand. I get it now. But please, don't leave us like this. I sighed, but there was no sympathy in my breath. You need to figure this out on your own. It's time for both of you to learn what it's like to take responsibility. You've had my help for far too long, and it ends today. The line went quiet, and I could almost hear his thoughts racing, unable to process the reality of it all. Goodbye, Renato, I said, finally ready to end the conversation. Enjoy your Christmas. I hung up without waiting for a response. For a moment, the world seemed incredibly still. I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of the situation settle in. This was the beginning of a new chapter, one where I no longer felt the burden of being the silent caretaker. By the time I left the hotel for a walk on the beach, I knew that today was the day everything would come to a head. I would watch from a distance as the facade Marlon had carefully built around her life would come crumbling down. My plans were working perfectly, and I wasn't about to let any of their desperate pleas for help take away the sense of liberation I had fought so long to achieve. As I walked along the shore, the waves gently lapping at my feet, I felt more at peace than I had in years. I was finally free. Free from the manipulation, the false responsibilities, and most importantly, free from Marlon's grip on my life. Tomorrow, when her family arrived, they would find that the perfect Christmas she promised had vanished. They would find out that it was all a lie. And I would be watching as they dealt with the consequences of their own actions, without me to save them this time. Have you explained the situation to them yet? What situation? How do I explain that my mother decided to go on vacation just when we needed her the most? When they needed her the most. Not when I needed respect, understanding, or even a simple thank you for 5 years of service. Only when they needed me. Tell them the truth, Renato. For 5 years, they took it for granted that I would be their free maid, and I finally decided that I deserved a vacation. Mom, they don't understand Spanish very well. I can't explain something so complicated. Then find a translator or learn to communicate better. I'm sure you can sort it out. I could hear voices in the background, multiple conversations, mixed with what sounded like panic and confusion. Someone was speaking in Spanish in a stern tone, probably Elias asking where the main hostess was. At least you can tell us where you always bought the food. What did you use to prepare for special occasions? Anything that helps us. Renato, I didn't always buy anything. I planned weeks in advance, researched recipes, made detailed lists, compared prices, and spent entire days preparing. It wasn't magic, it was work, a lot of work. The silence on the other side told me that they were finally starting to understand the magnitude of what they had been ignoring for years. Look, he continued with a smaller voice. I know we've been inconsiderate, but right now I need practical solutions. What do I do with 25 hungry people in my living room? Order takeout. Call restaurants, go to the supermarket. Do what responsible adults do when they have guests. But it's Christmas, everything is closed or super busy. Restaurants have no availability. Then maybe you should have thought about that before inviting 25 people without consulting the person you expected to do all the work. At that moment, I heard a new voice in the background speaking Spanish in a very serious tone. Elias clearly asking for an explanation about the situation. Mom, Marlon's uncle wants to talk to you. He says he needs to understand what's going on here. I'd love to talk to him, but I'm on vacation. Tell him that Marlon can explain everything perfectly. After all, she was the one who organized this gathering. Please, Mom, just 5 minutes. He's very confused and a little upset. I think he can help us resolve this. Help us. Again, everything was about helping them. It was never about what I needed, what I deserved, or how I had been made to feel for years. Renato, listen to me very well. For 5 years, every time you needed something, I was there. Every time Marlon wanted to impress someone, I did the work. Every time you had problems, I was the solution. Today, for the first time in half a decade, you all have to solve your own problems, and that's not my responsibility, but it's my family, he shouted, finally losing his composure. Is your grandson the one who's going to be left in a bad position? His grandson, of course, now appealed to the ultimate emotional blackmail, but there was a problem with his logic. What grandson, Renato? The question fell like a bomb. There was a long, tense silence. Well, in the future, when Marlon and there's the problem. It's all future plans, vague promises, expectations that I should fulfill based on possibilities, but there's never any consideration for what I need now. At that moment, I clearly heard Elias' voice speaking in English, obviously addressing Renato. Young man, do you understand what the kingdom of family organizes? Where is the woman of the house? Where is the grandmother who invited them? The woman of the house. The grandmother who invited them. Elias had clearly understood from his conversations with Marlon that I was the matriarch who organized these meetings, the main hostess, the person responsible for family hospitality. And now there was no one, just two confused adults finally facing the consequences of their own decisions. Mom, please, at least talk to him. Explain that there's a misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding, Renato. There's a reality that you've refused to see for years. And that reality is that without mutual respect, there is no functional family. I hung up. This time, I completely turned off the phone. It was time for the second phase of my plan. After turning off the phone, I headed to the hotel's business center. It was time to implement the most delicious part of my plan. For months, I had been preparing this, and now was the perfect time to execute it. I sat in front of a computer and opened my email. I had several new messages from Marlon's family, all received in the last 2 hours. The first one was from Griselda, the financially responsible sister. Dear Susanna, we just arrived at your house and the situation is quite confusing. Marley told us you left on an emergency, but we don't understand why the house looks uninhabited. There's no food, no Christmas preparations, and frankly, Marlon's attitude is very strange. Could we talk by phone? The second message was from Elias, and his tone was considerably more serious. Dear Mrs. Susanna, I respect that you had to travel for an emergency, but I need to understand what's happening in this house. Marlon can't coherently explain where the food she promised is, there are no Christmas decorations, and she didn't even know you wouldn't be here. This doesn't match at all with the picture she painted of the family situation. Please contact me urgently. Perfect. It was exactly the opening I had been waiting for. I replied to both emails with a carefully constructed message. Dear Elias and Griselda, I deeply regret the confusion. I was forced to advance my trip due to circumstances I prefer not to discuss by email. However, I think it's important that you understand the real situation of Marlon and Renato before continuing with the Christmas plans. The documents I sent you earlier only reflect part of the financial reality. If you truly want to help Marlon, I suggest you have a very frank conversation with her about her spending habits and unrealistic expectations about family support. With love, Susanna. I sent the message and waited. I didn't have to wait long. 20 minutes later, my hotel phone rang. It was the reception. Ma'am, you have a long-distance call. A Mr. Elias says it's urgent. Please put him through. Elias' voice sounded tense but controlled. Mrs. Susanna, thank you for taking my call. I need to ask you some direct questions about my niece. Of course, Elias, I'm all ears. First, is it true that Marlon has been asking you to cook and clean for all her family gatherings? Yes, it is. For the last 5 years, every time you've come or when she has guests, I've taken care of all the preparations. And when she told us about the elaborate dinners and perfect events, did she organize them or you? I planned everything from scratch. Marlon took the credit. There was a long pause. I could hear voices in the background, clearly Elias discussing something in Spanish with someone. Second question. Are the financial statements you sent us real? Completely real. I obtained them directly from my son's personal files. And Marlon knows that you discovered her debts. No, until today she had no idea that I knew about her secret spending or her lies about her income. I understand. His voice had turned as cold as ice. One more question. Why did you decide to leave exactly now? Because I got tired of being treated like a maid in my own house. Marlon assumed I would cook for 25 people without even asking if I was available or willing. The silence that followed was long and tense. Finally, Elias spoke with a voice full of disappointment and suppressed anger. Mrs. Susanna, my family owes you an apology. Marlon has been lying to us for years. She painted a picture of you as a prosperous family where she was the perfect organizer. She asked us for financial help to expand Renato's business when, apparently, the money was meant to pay for her compulsive shopping debts. I'm afraid so. And we, like fools, were willing to help because we thought she had proven to be responsible and successful, when in reality, you have been the one keeping everything running while she took the credit. I didn't expect you to know the truth. Well, now we do. And let me tell you that my family does not tolerate this kind of deception. Marlon is going to have to explain every lie, every deceit, every manipulation. I could imagine the scene in my house, a desperate Marlon trying to explain why there was no food, why the house was disorganized, why she couldn't cook for the family she invited. And now, on top of everything, having to face an uncle who knew all her financial secrets. Elias, if I may suggest something, please. I believe it would be beneficial for Marlon to face the natural consequences of her decisions. She's been living in a bubble of privilege where others solved her problems. Maybe it's time she learns to be truly independent. I completely agree. In fact, I have news for her that is going to drastically change her perspective. May I ask what kind of news? The supposed financial support she was expecting from the family for her husband's business. Well, that completely depended on her proving to be fiscally responsible and transparent. After seeing these documents and the current situation, I can assure you there will be no support. My smile grew wider. I understand, but there's more. My brother-in-law Enrique, who is going to help them with real estate connections, is also very upset. Apparently, Marlon had asked him to assess some properties for investment, including the house where you live. Did you know about this? This was new. I didn't know Marlon had gone so far as to ask Enrique to assess my house for sale. The betrayal was even worse than I had imagined. No, I didn't know about that. Well, Enrique is furious. He invested time and resources evaluating properties based on false information about Marlon's financial situation. He feels completely deceived. Like all of you. I imagine exactly what this leads me to my main point. My family has decided that this perfect Christmas is going to turn into a family intervention. Marlon is going to have to explain every lie, every deceit, every manipulation. A family intervention. This was even better than I had planned. Not only would Marlon have to face the logistical disaster of not having food or preparations, but she would also have to account for years of lies before her entire family. And what about the other relatives? They are all aware of the situation. Griselda is already reviewing all the financial documents you sent us. Evely is calling other family members to inform them about the real situation. By dinner time, the whole family will know the truth about Marlon. And she knows it. Not yet, but she's about to find out. I could hear voices rising in the background of the call. Clearly, things were intensifying at my house. Mrs. Susanna, I have to go back and face this situation, but I want you to know that my family respects you greatly for enduring this for so long and for having the dignity to walk away when you couldn't take it anymore. Thank you, Elias. That means a lot to me. One more thing, when you're ready to return, we hope to meet you properly. The real Susanna, not the employee that Marlon wanted you to be. It will be a pleasure. I hung up and leaned back in my chair, feeling a deep and warm satisfaction. At my house, Marlon's world of lies was crumbling piece by piece, exactly as I had planned, but the best was yet to come. That afternoon, I decided it was time to personally check how my masterpiece was unfolding. I hired a discreet chauffeur service and asked him to take me for a drive around my neighborhood, not to intervene, of course, but simply to observe from a safe distance the result of years of quiet planning. When we reached my street, the scene I found exceeded even my most optimistic expectations. There were 3 cars parked in my driveway that I recognized as Marlon's family rental vehicles. But what really caught my attention were the multiple supermarket bags scattered on the front porch, clearly abandoned in the middle of some kind of crisis. Stop here, I told the chauffeur, but stay at a distance where they can't see us. From my privileged position, I could see figures moving frantically behind the windows of my living room. Occasionally, Someone would step out to the backyard, talking on the phone with dramatic gestures. It was like watching a soap opera in real time, but 1,000 times more satisfying because I knew all the secrets the characters were about to discover. My phone vibrated. It was a text message from an unknown number. "Mrs. Susanna, this is Griselda. Could you call me when you have a moment? I need to ask you some questions about additional documents." I immediately called. Griselda answered on the first ring, and her voice sounded tense, but professional. "Mrs. Susanna, thank you for calling. I'm reviewing my sister's financial situation and, well, it's worse than we thought." "In what way?" "I just found out that she has been using Renato's name and credit information to open accounts he doesn't know about. This could be considered identity fraud." This was new to me. I had discovered the secret credit cards, but I didn't know Marlon had gone so far as to use my son's identity without his knowledge. "Renato knows. We just told him an hour ago." His reaction was intense. I could imagine my son, who had always been meticulous with his finances, discovering that his wife had been compromising his credit and financial reputation without his consent. How is he handling the information? Honestly, I think he's in shock. He keeps repeating that there must be a misunderstanding, that Marlon would never do something like that intentionally, but the documents don't lie. No, they don't lie. "Mrs. Susanna, I have to ask you something delicate. Did you know that Marlon told our family that you were considering making her the beneficiary of your will?" This question hit me like a lightning bolt. "What?" "Yes. Marlon told us that you loved her so much that you were planning to leave her the house and a significant portion of your savings. She used that as collateral for some of the loans she applied for." The betrayal was even deeper than I had imagined. Marlon had not only been lying about her current financial situation, but she had also been speculating about my death and my inheritance to obtain credit. "Griselda, I can assure you that this is completely false. My will does not include Marlon as a beneficiary of anything. I imagined it, but she used that story to convince some family lenders that it was a safe investment to lend her money." "Family lenders?" "Yes, some of our cousins who live in the United States. She borrowed more than $20,000 from them using her supposed future inheritance as collateral. $20,000 in debts that I was supposedly going to cover with my death. It was so twisted, so maliciously calculated, that for a moment I was left speechless. They know the truth. I'm explaining it to them right now. As you can imagine, they are not happy." I could hear voices rising in the background of our conversation. Clearly, the confrontations were escalating within my house. "Griselda, I have to ask you something. How is Marlon reacting to all these revelations?" There was a long pause. "She's in complete denial. She keeps insisting that it's all a misunderstanding, that the documents have been misinterpreted, that you're being vengeful because you felt excluded from the Christmas plans." Of course, even when confronted with irrefutable evidence of her lies and manipulations, Marlon was still trying to play the victim. "And how is the rest of the family taking it?" "Bad, very bad. My uncle Elias is furious because he was going to invest in Renato's supposed business based on completely false information. Evely is upset because she had planned to move near you to be close to the prosperous and stable family that Marlon had described. Enrique feels completely deceived about the property evaluations. And Christmas, what happened to the celebration plans?" Griselda laughed bitterly. "What Christmas?" "Marlon ordered pizza for 25 people because she didn't know how to cook anything else. We're eating on paper napkins because she can't find the good plates, and instead of celebrating, we're having the most intense family confrontation of our lives. Pizza for 25 people at the grand Christmas celebration that was supposed to impress the rich family. The irony was delicious. Do you know what the saddest thing is? Marlon keeps asking when you're coming back. She still thinks that somehow she will be able to manipulate you into coming back and fixing this mess. And what have you told her? The truth, that after 5 years of emotional abuse and manipulation, you finally had the courage to set boundaries and that we, as a family, respect you for it." That's when I felt a warmth spread through my chest. For the first time in years, there were people who understood and validated my position. "Griselda, can I ask what you plan to do now? You're staying for Christmas?" "Some are leaving tomorrow. This isn't the family gathering we expected, and frankly, we don't want to be part of the drama that Marlon created." But a few of us will stay to make sure she understands the consequences of her actions. What kind of consequences? Well, for starters, all the family loans will be canceled immediately. She will have to find a way to repay the money she has already received. The financial support for Renato's business obviously no longer exists, and we'll have to inform other family members about her pattern of lies to protect them from future manipulations. It was poetic justice. Marlon had built her life on a web of lies and manipulations, and now that web was spectacularly falling apart. And Renato, how's he processing all this? That's the saddest part. I don't think he really knew anything about Marlon's lies. He's devastated. He keeps saying he thought he married a different woman. My poor son, despite everything, still felt pain from his confusion and disillusionment, but I also knew this was the only way to open his eyes to the reality of his marriage. Griselda, is there anything else I should know? What? When I return home, and I will return soon, I'm going to make some important changes. Marlon will no longer have free access to my house. There will be new rules, new boundaries, and new consequences for disrespect. That sounds perfect. It's time for her to learn to live in the real world. I hung up the phone and asked the chauffeur to take me back to the hotel. I had seen enough for today. Tomorrow would be the day of my triumphant return. The morning of December 24th dawned cold, but bright, as if the universe had decided to bless my day of triumphant return. I woke up early, packed my bags calmly, and prepared for the final confrontation that I had been planning for months. Before leaving the hotel, I made one last call, this time to my lawyer, Robert. This is Susanna. Are all the documents we discussed ready? Perfectly ready, Susanna. The changes to the will have been notarized. The modification to the deed of the house is recorded, and the new residency agreements are prepared for your signature. Perfect. I'll see you in an hour at my house. Are you sure you want to do this on Christmas Eve? Robert, there's no more perfect moment. It's time for my family to learn the true meaning of gratitude. The taxi dropped me off at my driveway at 10 in the morning. The rental cars were still there, but now there was a different energy in the air, less frantic, more tense, like the calm before a storm that everyone knew was coming. I opened the door with my key, and the silence that followed was deafening. I could hear muffled voices from the kitchen, but they stopped abruptly when my heels echoed on the marble floor of the hallway. Susanna? Renato's voice sounded incredulous, almost hopeful. Yes, I'm back. Footsteps hurried toward me from multiple directions. First came Renato, with deep dark circles under his eyes and his hair disheveled, clearly having spent days without sleeping well. Behind him came Marlon, but it was a Marlon I had never seen before. Without makeup, with wrinkled clothes, eyes swollen from crying. Mom. Renato stepped forward as if to hug me, but stopped abruptly when he saw my expression. Thank God you're back. We need to talk. Oh, we'll talk, but not alone. At that moment, Marlon's family members appeared, Elias with his imposing presence and serious face. Griselda with a folder full of documents. Yvely and Enrique, both with expressions of deep disappointment. Mrs. Susanna, Elias approached and extended his hand respectfully. It's an honor to finally meet you. We deeply regret meeting you under these circumstances. The honor is mine, Elias, and don't worry about the circumstances. Sometimes the truth needs to come to light dramatically. Marlon finally found her voice, though it sounded broken and desperate. Susanna, please, we need to clear up this misunderstanding. My family is confused by some documents that... There's no misunderstanding, Marlon. There are facts, and it's time for everyone to know the complete truth. At that moment, the doorbell rang. It was Roberto, my lawyer, arriving right on time as promised. Perfect, Timon, I murmured as I headed to open the door. Roberto, thank you for coming. I think we're all ready for the conversation we've been postponing for years. Roberto entered with his professional briefcase, impeccably dressed despite it being Christmas Eve. His presence immediately changed the room's dynamic, adding a legal and official weight that made everyone straighten up. Good morning, he greeted professionally. I'm Roberto Mendoza, Mrs. Susanna's attorney. I understand there are some family and financial matters that need clarification. Marlon paled even further. Why is there a lawyer here? Because after 5 years of emotional abuse, financial manipulation, and total disrespect, I've decided I need legal protection. I replied calmly, icy cold. Legal protection? From what? From your wife's attempts to use my future death as collateral for loans. From her plans to convince you to sell my house to pay for her compulsive shopping debts. From her unauthorized use of your credit information. I need to continue. The silence that followed was absolute. Marlon collapsed onto the couch, finally understanding that her world of lies had completely collapsed. Roberto opened his briefcase. Mrs. Susanna, shall we proceed with the reading of the new documents, please? Very well. First, the changes to the will. Mrs. Susanna has amended her will to ensure that the ownership of this house can never be sold or mortgaged without her explicit consent, even after her death. The house will be transferred to a family trust that protects Renato's interests but prohibits any financial speculation. Marlon began to cry silently. Renato looked shocked, but for the first time, genuinely embarrassed. Second, the new residency terms. Marlon no longer has unrestricted access to this property. Any visits must be coordinated in advance and approved by Mrs. Susanna. What does that mean exactly? Renato asked in a trembling voice. It means your wife can no longer enter my house whenever she pleases to give orders about my food and my time, or assume I'm going to be her maid. Mom, I never knew You never knew. In 5 years, you never noticed that every time you had guests, I did all the work while she took the credit? You never wondered why your wife never cooked or cleaned, but always talked about how perfect a hostess she was. Renato lowered his head, finally confronting years of voluntary blindness. Elias approached Marlon, his voice heavy with paternal disappointment. Marlon, our family gave you opportunities, trust, and support based on lies. You made us unwitting accomplices in your disrespect for a woman who deserved our admiration, not our contempt. Uncle, I never meant to. Never meant to what? Lie about your income? Use credit? Promise inheritances that didn't belong to you? Treat your mother-in-law like a servant. Marlon had no answer. For the first time in 5 years, she had no manipulation, excuse, or deflection to offer. There's one more thing, I continued, looking directly at Marlon. You're going to repay every cent you borrowed using lies about my supposed inheritance. You're going to apologize personally to every family member you deceived, and you're going to learn to live within your actual means, not the fantasy you built at my expense. And if she doesn't? Griselda asked. Then she will face the appropriate legal consequences for identity fraud and fraudulent credit acquisition. Roberto closed his briefcase. The documents are ready for signing when you are prepared. I addressed the entire family gathered in my living room. For 5 years, I sacrificed my dignity believing I was holding the family together, but I've learned something important. A family built on disrespect and manipulation is not a family at all. It's a toxic structure that harms everyone involved. I looked specifically at Renato. Son, I love you, but you have to decide what kind of man you want to be. One who allows his wife to abuse his mother, or one who defends respect and honesty in his family. Finally, I looked at Marlon. And you have to decide if you want to be a responsible adult who faces the consequences of her actions, or keep being a manipulative child who expects others to solve the problems she creates. The clock struck noon on Christmas Eve. Outside, other families would be preparing celebrations full of genuine love and mutual respect. Now, I said with a smile I had been holding for months, those who want to stay for a Christmas based on honesty, respect, and real gratitude are welcome. Those who prefer to keep living in fantasies and manipulations can leave. For the first time in 5 years, I had total control of my house, my life, and my future. And I had never felt such sweet freedom.